Mini episode 1197 of the FDH Lounge is brought to you by Sportsology, delivering unconventional columns and webcasts about sports, TV, music, movies, and more. Follow them on the web at sportsology.com.
The FDH Lounge. You want to schedule your life around it.
A long time ago, on a gloomy, wet Cleveland spring night, two men stand alone amidst the late-night drizzle. Their voices echo across the vacant station parking lot as they debate the merits of the great American radio show that have been missing for far too long. On that night, an idea was born. That idea became the FDH Lounge. Welcome to the FDH Lounge.
Hello everyone, welcome to FDH Lounge mini episode 1197. This is FDH Managing Partner Rick Morris here. We've got good friend, fellow FDH Lounge dignitary, and our go-to guy for all things hoops, Ben Chu, with us here today, and we are going to be talking about, it's been a couple of weeks now, so we've had a chance to kind of let it kind of settle in as far as the media coverage, pop culture coverage, whatnot, of the passing of Kobe Bryant, something that was obviously extremely shocking, one of the biggest cultural earthquakes thus far in the early 2020s, as we're sitting here today in February. So Ben Chu is actually the gentleman who first apprised me of this. I'm sitting here on a Sunday afternoon just working on a few things and get a text from him, and he had passed along the tweet from TMZ, and I just texted him back immediately and said, "Is this real?" And he's like, "I don't know, looking to see if it is." And subsequently, unfortunately, Ben, it was. But so you are the one person who I know came to this news a little bit quicker than I did. How did you happen to stumble across it in the first place?
Well, it was very interesting. A very good friend of mine and me are working on a top secret basketball project. And he sent me a text message saying, he's not exactly the biggest of men, but he sent me the text saying, "Oh, Kobe Bryant died." And I'm like, huh? I saw the text that said Kobe died. I'm like, was that like a miss from it? Was that something that I wasn't paying attention to? And then he sent me the screenshot of the TMZ photo of what was going on. And then I think we all found out about like 5 to 10 minutes later. I think it was the first to officially confirm it from the NBA. So it was just a very bizarre day because it's kind of basically Sunday. The Gators only 3 or 4 teams, Denver and Houston, was set to tip off a little bit later in the day. And we haven't had a sports test like this in a long time. These with accidents that isn't old age or cancer or anything. And I think that's why it took a lot of people by surprise. Just the dramatic and crazy nature that the singularity of our lives can bring.
Yeah, and it's one of these things where, again, I don't know what it was in my head, but as I'm seeing the news, like, I didn't put 2 and 2 together on the geography. Like a Calabasas helicopter crash, and my first thought was, what was he doing in the Caribbean? I forgot that was an area in California, and that it was a thing. And then when it became clear that it was out there, again, it got substantiated in relatively short order, and it was one of those things, I know you and I talked about this as far as the day of it happening, that you contrast and compare a national event like the Pro Bowl to the NBA draft of 2009, which took place on the same day Michael Jackson passed away. On that day, I remember joking about this, that the ESPN people were probably walking around with cattle prods, like, don't talk about MJ, tonight's about the draft, because like hardly anybody did. ESPN successfully put a bubble over the 2009 NBA draft. In the social media age, Ben, you can't do that. You can't dictate what people are and are not going to be talking about. People are going to be talking and thinking about the Kobe situation that day, and there was nothing anybody could do about it.
Right, and initially a lot of reports took a while for a bunch of these places because I think also a lot of the news outlets, as understandable at the time, is that they want to make sure that the news is confirmed there wasn't any sort of weirdness or
Sure.
any sort of bizarre, because we always think it's like, because we always, the reputation of TMZ is going to be the reputation of TMZ, but most of the time when they report it on source,
That's right.
source, and that is usually correct. And I think the more bizarre part was that it was Sunday too. That it was one of those. It wasn't a midday on like a Tuesday or a Friday night, where most of us were probably just going around our daily business and catching up on other things, trying to open our days when this hit. Because most of the time when we think about celebrity death, that if you He had all the talent in the world, but I think most people were very skeptical because up to that point, the only really successful high schools in the NBA players were big guys, Kevin Garnett, Spencer Hayward, guys who were, 6'8" or higher. And Kobe was kind of safely 6'6", but he had all the talent, and we all knew his history. It's just, that's what makes I think unique, and I don't think we'll see someone like him for a long time in that period.
I totally agree with that, and that's one of those things. You go back to the '96 draft, and I was at the Cavs draft party that night, and I remember my friend and I were aggrieved that the Cavs not passed over not Kobe Bryant, but John Wallace. You think back to the time, and again, he had a world of potential. Jerry West saw it, and again, he made sure that they got him. All credit in the world to Jerry West. That's why he's one of the best in the history of the NBA at what he does, if not the best. And he saw it and developed it. And again, this is one of these things where 2 points to what you said. One, about when it happened on a Sunday afternoon when most of us were off work. There's always people that are at work somewhere, but Sunday afternoon is about as light as it gets probably in society. And that had something to do with it because a couple weeks back, I know this is not nearly the same thing on the celebrity scale, but Rush being my favorite group of all time, and of course you, Ben, with your Canadian blood, knowing full well how big they are north of the border. When Neil Peart's death broke late on a Friday afternoon, that evening it was all over social media. Again, a tiny scale compared to what we're talking about here, but nevertheless, that people are getting off work, they're seeing it, they're digesting it, they're sharing their thoughts and their memories. But yeah, I mean, when it happened, you're right about that with Kobe. It would not have been the exact same moment in time if it had happened, say, at 2:30 on a Tuesday afternoon. I mean, it still would have been huge, but there was something to so many of us at that point in time being off work, relaxing, watching TV, whatever you do on a Sunday, that helped make that moment what it was in terms of, I think, the way that it hit everybody.
Right. I also think too is that with the helicopter crash, the ESG called as that. I think a lot of NBA fans were kind of warming up and understanding more of Kobe's persona, especially in his later years post-retirement. And it really kind of sad at the end of the day to think that what could have been, what he was doing with his media groups, what he was doing with working with former players, what he was doing with his daughter, who passed away in that helicopter crash as well, that what she was going to become and possibly a future star for UConn and the WNBA. And the immediacy, I always like to say, of death is one of those things that you just deal with, and we all process death and differently, regardless of anything overall. But when something is that shocking, that it takes people differently, and I mean that's why they postponed the Clipper-Laker game on the Tuesday, and I would say mournful scene on Friday between the Blazers and the Lakers at Staples. It wasn't. I've been in stadiums and I've been in arenas, and I actually went to a game that day of the Pacers and the Blazers later that night, and there was discussion they were going to cancel the games and all these things. It's a very bizarre result to that arena, and it's one of those that everyone honors Kobe in their own way. We're still going to honor Kobe. It's going to be remembered, especially now with the MVP, All-Star MVP award being named after him. And just, it's a bizarre thing to think that someone so polarizing is now gone. It's just like, you snap your finger, it's over. And that's why I think the whole thing with Mamba mentality and just all these things that he preached during the timeline, a lot of us are looking at that and we're thinking, how does that impact our lives? How can we be better at the end of the day?
Yeah, I mean, the way that it played out, I mean, I have a couple different thoughts about what you just said there. One is, it strikes me that in terms of the way that it goes with the NBA, and being that it is a newer major sport than certainly MLB, which is the oldest one in this country, and even the NFL, this in the immediate aftermath, like, most of the legends are still alive. It's one of those things where you look at it, like, not all of them, Wilt's gone and whatever, but you've got Bill Russell still here, you've got Kareem, you've got so many of them, and that they are now eulogizing Kobe. And you always thought that Kobe would be one of the ones whenever they passed, eulogizing them. So it's jarring because the NBA hasn't had a lot of this. A lot of the NBA legends live into old age. particularly the most prominent ones. I mean, even Magic. I mean, look, we're almost about 30 years on from that. Magic was one of the ones that people thought would be gone young once he got the HIV diagnosis in 1991. And in 2020, he's eulogizing Kobe Bryant. I mean, that's just one of the weird aspects of this. It seems more jarring in the NBA because legends don't tend to die young that much.
Right, and I mean, we've had cases, obviously, of players who have died early on. The most notable ones probably are Pistol Pete.
Yes.
You would consider Reggie Lewis's death and Myers' death as, even though Len didn't officially play in the NBA, he was drafted in that timeline. So it's just really sort of, it doesn't happen often, and it also doesn't happen to someone who is such a polarizing figure. I mean, that's not to downplay any of the other teams.
No.
I think it's more in terms of when you have someone, because at least in the cases that I've named, those were all health-related reasons. Kobe's death was completely out of the realm of, it was an accident. That's essentially what happened.
Right.
And I think accidents are things that take a little bit longer to process for most people than just living and dying as we normal, as we human beings do.
Well, and I'll tell you what, I'm glad you mentioned Pistol Pete, one of my childhood heroes. I had read a thing, I think it was on The Ringer last week, where it was looking back to the '88 All-Star Game in Chicago. Hard to believe that being the last time it was there, as they said in the article. That seems very weird. But that again, and we're going to talk subsequently about the Kobe thing All-Star Weekend, but just for right now, I want to draw the comparison here. Really, really weird that part of the '88 All-Star Game was a memorial to Pistol Pete. Under similar circumstances. Again, a heart attack, undiagnosed deal, whatever. But again, just perishing out of nowhere, essentially, and leaving people shocked and whatever. And that he, again, from his game on the court, from his flair, from the things that he did, very Kobe-esque as far as leaving an impact on people, being a very memorable player to watch. So, 32 years later, just a really odd parallel and another sad one.
Right, and I think the big thing is that with athletes, it's the same things I would think with actors and musicians, that these are public figures and they create works of art that you can go back and look at. It's very different from, and I mean, and again with social media, with Instagram, with Facebook, with Facebook, all these things, is that starting to change for us in our personal lives as well, because we can go back and look and track back the photos of people that we know in our lives at different periods of time and what we look like in different periods of time. But in a grander scale, that's what I think celebrities are for people at this timeline, that even though the art or who they are as people can be part of immediately gone, it still exists. It continues onward and to look at. So it goes into space. You think probably, there are people out there who are just, if we think about how life is different and how everything is, that's the one thing that you have about legends never really die at the end of the day. When legends never really die, the work lives on no matter what, and we have that in space, especially in our technology-based timeline.
Yeah, and that's one of those things, too, where the way that it ties in, I mean, this is not so much comparable to other sports deaths. I mean, it is in a way, but really larger sort of pop culture type things here when you go back over a period of time. I referenced Michael Jackson, and again, 2009 was sort of a mini 2016 as far as the number of legends who passed that year. I mean, the same day as Michael Jackson was Farrah Fawcett, so I mean, that kind of proves my point. There was a lot of legends in 2009, in 2016. We remember Princess Di in 97. This is one of the bigger ones, or for anybody who's around like me, for the Challenger explosion of 86. I actually wasn't at a school thing at the time. It was going to be everybody gets together in the auditorium to watch it, and I can only imagine what that must have been like. But I think I was out at like driver ed or somewhere. I think I was in the car, and I found out about it when I got back there. So when you talk about moments that you'll never forget, again, I was at my fantasy football draft in 97 when Princess Di. You truly never forget anything about where you are when these things break. And that's where, like I said, this is pretty much like beyond sports to just very memorable moments in life. And then additionally, something that I think I first noticed this at the time of the Michael Jackson thing, because there were a lot of people that were wondering why people were so sad and everything like that, particularly for all, I mean, for whatever Kobe was polarizing for, Michael Jackson that much more so, because of the disturbing nature of what was alleged about him. And yet everyone was really kind of sad, and that's, the thing I kind of came to in my own mind was, you're mourning for a piece of yourself. You were intertwined in these memories. We have memories of watching these things, and it's sort of a memory that lingers in your head. And then when that person's not here, it's not like it's taken away from you, but it's just that it's sort of just a reminder that, we're all going to die someday. These things were ephemeral. That happened then. There's been a lot of water under the bridge since we remembered that particular thing. So I think a lot of it just comes down to mourning for a piece of ourselves, the piece of ourselves that's intertwined with any of these celebrities.
Sure, and I think that's the same thing with our own interpersonal relationships with people as well in our everyday lives. And I think the thing that makes celebrity deaths more different than people who really didn't even know who Kobe Bryant was, really, or barely watched any of his who he was. And he just casted a huge shadow over Los Angeles in terms of being a celebrity, being a basketball superstar for the Lakers. And I think just with how he was as a person, because we're not, at the end of the day, I don't like to cast judgment on anyone, but he had a very interesting career just generally.
Right.
Of his team. His value, since he was, as a basketball player, he was bristled. He wasn't really liked by a lot of his teammates at different periods of time. He had the infamous Shaq Kobe thing that everyone talks about forever, and he was a very complex individual, and I think nearing the end, when he was going through his retirement phase, like we saw sort of the more chill, relaxed version of Kobe, instead of the guy who was on the floor willing to, rip your heart out and just show it to you at the end of the day. And it kind of gives us pause that we have to realize that athletes are human beings as well too. We always perceive that these celebrities are really different from us, but to be honest, at the end of the day, we're really all just kind of the same. We all go through different things. Now, the magnitude is obviously different, but we will all deal with the same emotions at the end of the day. And I think that's why a lot of us could relate to Kobe later on in his career and his post-career.
Well, in terms of that, I wonder as well, in terms of how revered he was in L.A., and so many people saying that he's their favorite Laker of all time, such that it kind of made it tough for LeBron the first year and a half there, really, almost up until this point, as far as sort of replacing Kobe, if you will, as the on-court face of the Lakers, because they really haven't had a replacement since LeBron got there. But I wonder how much of that is tied up in the fact that they went on to win 2 titles and make another finals appearance post-Shaq. Because a lot of people looked at that at the time, like I did, like Kobe kind of drove him out of there. That was the sense that I kind of had of it, that it was a war of wills, Kobe won, and you better back it up if you're going to do that. And he did back it up. Because I wonder what his legacy would be as a Laker. It would be, he was great with Shaq and whatever, but then egos got in the way. The fact that they won 2 more titles later on, I think, is what allowed him, whether it's justified or not, to point back and say, see, everything worked out the way it should have.
Right. I think the one thing we can also just note with the end of his career is that he did play for one team for a really long time. And it's not
the whole way.
Very rare, but I think moving forward in the NBA, we're going to see tremendous player movement just generally, because there's always going to be scenarios where super teams can be created, or the dynamic duels we've been seeing in the league thus far this season. And I think we're going to see guys stay with their teams for long periods of time, but I think we are not going to see it as, and I mean, we're not going to see it as, we're going to still see guys stay with their original team for long, but I think with player movement the way it is, I think we as fans now kind of know that our favorite players are not going to stay with our favorite teams for the entire length of their career in most circumstances.
That's true, yeah, and that's part of it as well.
The argument too is that during that double check, there was discussion that Kobe was going to go to the Clippers, or Kobe was trying to work a deal with the Bulls at some point. So even he, at that point, I know it's revisionist history at this point, was someone who was looking to go somewhere else.
Yeah, that's true. And that, the way that it kind of gets painted because he didn't is that there might have been temptation, but he never gave in to the temptation. And that's the way that history has kind of read it out. And again, just a really incredible legacy that he had on court, really starting to do a lot of stuff off court the last couple of years. And again, just it was really a thing where the outpouring that there was really kind of reflective of that, again, from the sports world, but far beyond, and being noted in so many different corners, and just ongoing for really a couple of weeks. I mean, something that overshadowed probably the first 2/3 of Super Bowl week, which is almost impossible to do in the sports world, because, you know, if anybody lets out flatulence at the Super Bowl press conference, that's a 48-hour story. But, you know, there was basically nothing the early part of the week, whether it was out of respect for him or just the reality that it was going to kind of overshadow things anyways. And yeah, it's a story that really kind of kept going and going and going for the first week or two. Like you said, it kind of built to the first home game back at Staples. They postponed what would have been the first home game at Staples that Tuesday night against the Clippers, and that is going to be very emotional when those two teams meet at any point in time there, as it would have been anyways, but just a little bit more weight because of what Kobe meant to the entire city in terms of LA basketball. And again, it was just really the kind of thing that is very, very rare in overall pop culture. Again, not just basketball, not just sports, but that's one of those things where the shock and the grief just kind of kept rolling in waves publicly for quite some period of time. We're coming off of the All-Star weekend that I thought was going to kind of cap it in a lot of ways, but we're still about a week out from the official memorial, 224. Trying to time it for, you know, in honor of his number there. But this is one of these things where, again, the number of people who could command something like this on God's green earth, you could almost count on one hand, really.
Right, and it's weird to say because early on in his career, I think there was a lot of discussion with, like, oh, who is this sort of 18, 19-year-old kid who thinks he's going to be just as good as Jordan? And he lived up to the hype and got very close. And it didn't shock me at all when the TV rating for the Laker-Blazer game, that it was the second highest rated game, NBA game telecast in ESPN history, only behind Shaq versus Yao in 2004, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
It didn't shock me one bit because even the casual basketball fan, Kobe Bryant was a omnipresent individual who was everywhere, and Mamba mentality, and just all these things that he kind of stood for, made him a very unique person. And I don't think like I said, this is why a lot of people would think he was a one-of-one, because I don't think we'll ever see someone with that sort of background, that sort of flair for the dramatic, and kind of that mentality to be like, I really don't care what you think of me. I'm just going to figure out what I need to do for myself on a daily basis. And what he did very well, especially near the end of his career, was just go out there and make big plays, make big shots. And he eventually, we all learned from just his side of the whole thing of Mamba mentality. I mean, I think back to when it was I think the postscript of his career is when he scored 60 against Utah. I remember earlier in the week that there was a joke that Shaq made, and it was like, can you get me 40 points? It's like, and then Kobe laughed, like, I don't think I'm going to get 40. He went out and got 60.
Yeah.
So at the end of the day, that was kind of the person that we saw as just as a basketball player, but we got to learn a little bit about him in his post-retirement career, and I think that's what makes all this kind of sad, because a lot of people were lost on that flight, and they will never get to know what could have been for a lot of them, and I think that's why we treat celebrity death the way we do, is that we remember the good times, the bad times, but then also we remember what could be and what should be, or what could have been. And I think there's going to be always those questions we'll always ask, but I think with Kobe Bryant, at least we saw enough of his career that we could say that he lived up to the potential and he was just getting started to show the rest of it.
Yeah, and that's one of those things where when you look at it, again, I was certainly never a Kobe honk in any way. Good part of his career, he was one of the guys standing in the way, at least potentially, of my Cavs winning a championship. So there was that. I've never really rooted for the Lakers unless they're playing the Celtics in the finals, because I really hate the Celtics. But other than that, again, never been a Kobe honk, but I'm very, very pleased that in the aftermath of this, there has been so little, you basically said polarizing. Obviously, in a lot of ways, what we're referring to here is the outcome of the 2003 case in Colorado, which was a real turning point for him and for his career, and also I think his personal life. I'm pleased that there was a backlash against anybody that tried to raise that at this time, because it really didn't seem respectful and to do that in any form or fashion. And I think, and this is just my interpretation of things, you talk about things again that what was a amusing and kind of heartwarming meme of him and his daughter at the game a couple weeks before now is just incredibly sad to look at. But it's one of those things where everyone talks about what a great father he was to all of his daughters. And what I take from that is, because again, there was wrongdoing on whatever level at the time. We don't know the legal facts of the case. We may never know. But dude was married and his wife was publicly humiliated. So on some level, there's indisputably wrongdoing. It seems like he, as a father of nothing but daughters, didn't have any sons, took that, rededicated himself, and tried to set a good example for his daughters. And you can't help but respect that.
Right. And I think, too, especially when we tend to deal with these substitutes differently, and it wouldn't shock me if having to deal with that case, which I agree with you in terms of that nature too, Greg, was that bringing it up at that point, just, that was a quick thing. We all know that.
Right.
That was just quickly, because I don't think it, whenever it is a high-profile sexual assault case like that, I think bringing it up for the victim and making them feel worse is,
Sure.
I think, that's horrible at that point. That's even worse than just trying to make comparison at that point. Because there's no level of empathy that you can say that makes you feel for trying to shame someone after they die.
Right.
And I don't think, and I think at the end of the day, that was just a very controversial case. A lot of mistakes were made on both sides. And I think, like you said, we'll never know the true answer. We'll only know the reports really tell us at the end of the day. And I think it wouldn't be doing good. It would be doing justice to not mention it. And it was a huge thing, and it would not shock me if that was possibly another thing that helped the Shaq Kobe Lakers come to an end, because when you're dealing with a scenario like that, it can really break up the team. And we have to. I think in terms of casting judgment on individuals, it's very easy to take the way out of saying, like, this is true, this is false, because there's always a gray area in every sort of scenario we've ever been in. And I think we tend to not think like that because we as human beings tend to focus on what is a thing and what isn't a thing. But most of the time, really, just as we are, it's maybe in the middle.
Yeah, and that's the thing, too, where, again, nobody was saying in the end that Kobe was a saint. The whole thing about Mamba mentality was basically acknowledging that there were a lot of people out there at any given point in time that didn't like this guy for his competitiveness and whatever. So he wasn't being misrepresented in a positive sense. He was being presented, I think, as the complicated figure that he was. But people were still incredibly saddened, and understandably so. It'd be one thing if he were being misrepresented as a saint. I didn't see anybody doing that. So yeah, there wasn't a call for the few.
And I mean, especially with this, that's why, again, and especially cases like that, it's very hard because you don't want a victim blame, you don't want a victim shame, you also don't want to deal with. It's tougher because with repercussions of these things in regards to sexual assault.
Right.
It's very hard because there's always two sides to every story, and you don't want to mischaracterize the victim under any circumstance, because I think we tend to do that in terms of the case in the moment too. I
I would agree with that. And in terms of looking at how this...
I like to hold the preference in most teams.
Uh-huh.
In most.
Right.
There
Well,
are
yeah.
always specific, there are always specific outliers in any situation. I'm just making sure that doesn't get cut into somewhere.
Yeah. Duly noted on that. And yeah, these matters a lot of times can be complicated. Another thing that is going to be complicated, and, for as much as it seems crass to want to evaluate how this is going to affect things on court going forward, it's an inescapable part of the story. It really is. And you and I have talked about this a little bit off air, and you would know that there's not much precedent for a team being able to leverage something like this in the positive sense of being able to play your way to a championship. Me, as a Red Wings fan, the first thing I think of is '98. Dedicating the season to Konstantinov and the two others in the limo accident, and again, successfully doing it. That's the one thing that kind of jumps to mind. I do think, as well as, there are, again, not too many times in the world of sports when you can think of that being the case. And this is something where, in a way, this is not in the way that LeBron or anybody would have wanted it, but I think this kind of gets the whole thing off of his back as far as not being regarded as a worthy successor to Kobe, or you're trying to erase Kobe by being here. Now that Kobe's not around anymore, I don't think LeBron is going to be getting any of that, and I think that the Kobe fans appreciate the way that LeBron has tried to sort of put this situation on his back and use it to try to get whatever you can out of it positively, win a championship, which is what Kobe would have wanted to come out of this, certainly, if this was going to happen to him. But when you look at it here, again, they are one of the prime contenders in the Western Conference. I would regard them as probably still the favorites at this point, and you and I are about to record a separate sort of NBA analysis of the moment right now. But just as far as isolating it to this particular thing, your thoughts on what this tragedy might do with them the rest of the season here, because one way or another, it's not going to play out the way it would have otherwise. This being a factor is either going to help motivate them more or help hold them back. There's no in the middle to me.
Right, and I agree with you there, because in cases of something like this, just in this case, there's only two ways you're going to fall. It's either you're going to win an NBA championship or you're going to fail to live up to expectation. I'm leaning towards the fact that the Lakers are a very good team right now. AD and LeBron together have been incredible, and LeBron's been on the floor. He's been playing some of his best basketball of his career. I honestly think in that period of time that the Lakers does that, it's going to be very interesting to see post All-Star break how they play, because a little bit after the Kobe, they did feel, you could tell that the buzzsaw that they were kind of was falling off a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And I think moving forward for them is that they have two of the top 15 players in the NBA right now. They have a very good chance of surviving. The question will be, the rest of the team is going to be the real question marks in terms of how are they going to compete when it comes to this thing. Because we have to tend to forget that this Lakers team with LeBron is in year two, really. They haven't made the playoffs yet. And I think, especially with a lot of the teams in the Western Conference the way they are right now, it's arguably probably the Lakers' best opportunity to get to the NBA final.
Yeah, it probably is, yeah, before they kind of get their legs underneath them, because you're right about that. Denver is still a developing team. Utah, Dallas, even though they're ahead of schedule, obviously they're still developing. The Clippers are kind of a different story, because like the Lakers, they were basically quick assembled to be champions right now, and indeed they possibly can be, and there are a lot of us that have seen that as the likely Western Conference Finals the whole time, and still see that as the case going forward. I will ask you this, if it comes to this, that particularly now, because again, we saw what happened opening night when, without the backdrop of any of this, the Clippers were still booed in their own building against the Lakers, and that it doesn't matter who is technically the home team in any of these games in LA. Do you buy the scenario a lot of people are talking about, and especially now with the passing of Kobe adding extra emotion to it, that if it's the Western Conference Finals at Staples, every one of those games will be a de facto home game for the Lakers?
I think it will be, yeah.
Okay.
I don't think we'll see LA be LA in the Western Conference Final, but no, I'm one of the very few people that don't believe that's going to happen. I just think
Well, you've been consistent on that point the whole way, and it is interesting to look at in light of what happened here. But yeah, a fascinating story, a sad story with the passing of Kobe Bryant. And again, there's nobody better to break it down with, nobody better to get insights from than good friend and longtime FDH Lounge dignitary Ben Chu. Ben, thank you so much for being a part of the discussion today.
I appreciate it, Rick. Mama mentality.
Mama mentality, bro. And thank you, everybody, for tuning in to FDH Lounge Mini Episode 1197.